Hey there. It's a few minutes late, but we're still making it. I had to shut down my computer in the midst of setting up our Facebook Live today, but thanks for joining me on a Friday. My name is Julie Hirschberg. I am the owner of Re+active Physical Therapy and Wellness, and today, look at this, I'm in the clinic. I've got my very lovely reactive mask here. Thank you, Bianca, for getting those for us in our practice. And I'm seeing people in person. I'm also seeing some people in telehealth today, but it's just very nice to be back in the clinic and doing what I love. And it's been really nice to interact with a community of physical therapists, occupational therapists, and a lot of learning and growth over this time. And last night actually was probably a real highlight for me. We have our Brain Bites community, which launched this month in May, and we've been having our live sessions. And last night we had a patient join us for a live session, and we had this fun collaborative document going in the background talking about where we might want to go, what questions we had, and then we could filter that to Brittany leading the patient through a treatment session. I left that so jazzed. My family was like, "What were you doing?" And I was like, it was like I had been at an amusement park. I was like, I was just having so much fun. So it's been really just a true pleasure of mine to be with other therapists during this time and having a lot of support and uplifting community and energy. I'm really energized by that. And I think a lot of us are. And it's sustaining us through a very weird time that we're in. So thank you for that. Um, what we were going to talk about today is something that's coming up over and over again. I got an email from somebody actually in our Brain Bites group about a patient who's had just a really intense flare of symptoms. Not sure totally what it is, full body tremors that are happening right now, and the person's under a lot of stress, which I think a lot of us are right now. We're over 2 months into the pandemic. It's definitely brought a high level of stress to me as a clinic owner. I've talked to a lot of other clinic owners. Being in this state of unknown has been really stressful. And a lot of stress or anxiety, even loneliness, to the people that we're working with, especially as they're isolated a lot more. I've been doing some of our research visits as part of a Huntington's disease exercise trial, and that's been the story I'm hearing from those participants is they're alone and they're lonely and they want to get back out. And some of their symptoms might be worse because of this. And a lot of us have noticed that. Maybe it's in the form of more pain, more tremor, more sensory symptoms, more swelling, all of those things related to immune function and neurologic function that are impacted by stress. So today, what I really wanted to dive into is how do we prepare for this and navigate through flare ups? And so we're going to talk through three big things. First, how the pandemic might contribute to a flare up. I think that's a no brainer. How can we build our sandbags? So I've got my printouts again here. So I got our sandbags and our river here that we're going to talk about. And prepping for this journey. So we're going to use our journey handout too. All of our great tools. Doro actually said, I've seen an increase in spasticity. Absolutely. I think, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the science of this too, but when you have a neurologic disorder and it includes things like tremor, stiffness, spasticity, increased tone, weakness, all of those symptoms are greatly impacted by the effects of stress less sleep, changes in diet, all of those things that are happening right now. So let's talk about these things because we're in a pandemic and we're seeing flare ups. So the first thing that I think about is a change in pattern. What change in patterns have you seen? I know I've seen a lot of them. Probably the biggest one is sleep. So people have a change in their sleep pattern because there's a change in the overall daily living pattern. And we know that sleep is so important for the nervous system, in particular, basically for kind of cleaning out the brain, so to speak, through the CSF. I kind of think of sleep as providing this vacuum system to the brain while we're sleeping. It consolidates memories and new learning. And so if you're feeling a little cognitively fuzzy and foggy, and the people you're working with are too, it might be due to a change in sleep pattern. This has definitely happened to me, and I'm a huge sleeper, a big believer in sleep. I sleep really well, and even my sleep patterns have changed. So that's one piece, change in sleep pattern, change in activity pattern. We're just not getting out of the house, right? Because we're not supposed to. So our activity has changed. And I know for myself personally, I had to build in activity instead. I had to build in more running and walking during the day because I'm just not walking to work, and I'm not walking to the store and things that I would normally be doing. And that's happening for our clients as well, even more so, I would say. And then the third thing, a change in pattern that we hear about a lot, that is certainly happening for me, is a change in an eating pattern. I've seen these like really funny memes of, of the refrigerator calling people's names during the day when you're at home, for example, or if you tend to eat more under stress or eat differently under stress. I, for one, could really overdo French fries under stress, that like need for fatty, salty foods when there's a lot of cortisol. So eating patterns have changed. So that's one piece that we see that can contribute to a flare up, is change in patterns. The second in this pandemic, especially, is that unknown and that stress and that anxiety. And I want to just take a little side detour to the autonomic nervous system here, because this is a big one. And I had a client this week even say to me, like, I feel like my fight or flight is just right there, like no matter what, it turns on really quick. And I think that can come during this time. So that fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system, has a lot of interconnections with our nervous system, with our guts, with our hormones. So it signals for release of things like epinephrine and cortisol, and those directly affect our cardiovascular system, our respiratory system, our immune system. And there's a couple of great papers. I was looking for some things that were free full text, and I'll put some links in here because there were a couple of great papers that went through with a lot of science, by the way. A lot of, when we get into the immune and the neuroimmune system, you get a lot of pro-inflammatory cytokines and things like that. So a lot of science in there, but a couple of good free full text review papers that really look at the stress, the sympathetic nervous system response on both the nervous system, the brain, and some of those symptoms like increase in spasticity, as well as the immune system. So, especially in prolonged stress, we know that it's going to affect the autonomic nervous system and that hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or it's also called HPA. And those systems being ramped up over time have shown to cause an increase in inflammatory markers. This is something that I'm going to be very honest and forthright about my own story here. This is definitely something that I have seen in myself. So I have rheumatoid arthritis, so autoimmune inflammatory disease, and it's been very well controlled for many years, even without medication. And during this pandemic, for the first time in many years, I had a flare. All of my joints were swollen. It was hard to use my hands again. My feet were really painful. These were all of my initial symptoms as well. And honestly, wasn't surprising to me that I was under a lot of stress as a clinic owner and trying to keep our clinic alive and dealing with all of the amounts of information coming in, my kids not being in school, all of us working from home, so many changes happening at once. Really not surprising for me, but tough nonetheless. Tough to have those symptoms after not having them for a while, and can be very easy for me to then go, okay, like my body's given up, I can't trust it, what am I going to do here? And honestly, that's where I was when I was initially diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And i I felt really defeated, and that is where you can really feel in a flare. So, how do we build these sandbags of resilience for ourselves and for the people that we're working with? So, I dove right into my sandbags. I'm going to tell you really honestly some of the things that I did. But I love this diagram that Mike Studer, Chelsea Richardson put together for our CSM presentation. We did it for functional movement disorders, but really, I love this for myself, but for anybody. So essentially, we look at the nervous system as this like lovely flowing river, right? And when it when the excitation or activity increases too high, we're getting an overflow, a waterfall. And in a functional disorder, that might be tremor, jerks, gait changes. It might be spasticity in a nervous system disorder. It might be in terms of rheumatoid arthritis, it might be swelling and joint pain and severe fatigue. And what we can see is that these kinds of things, so trauma, stress, lack of sleep, fatigue, all can contribute to that overflowing river. But we've got the ability to build sandbags. And so what we would say is in therapy, this is what we're doing, helping identify and build these fitness, exercise, meditation, sleep habits, eating healthy, doing fun activities, getting outside, addressing emotional health, providing control. And I think this is one of the big ones in this pandemic too. So if you think of the optimal theory, autonomy, external focus, where we can access automatic behaviors and activities and have control, is a really great sandbag here. So I'm going to just give a little quick personal story here on one of the worst days of my flare, where I was in a lot of pain, a lot of joint pain, a lot of swelling. I had a regularly scheduled run. So this is one of my sandbags, is I need accountability for my running. And recently, Amy, thank you, Amy, at our practice, one of the PTs here, who's amazing, we started doing Sunday morning runs, 7 a.m. We've been going every week. And I went into that run and said, Amy, I'm in a flare. I'm having a lot of joint pain and swelling. I'm not sure I can run, but I want to try. And what I love about Amy is she's like, I don't have to run fast. We don't have to go far. Let's go with what your body feels good. What was amazing in that is I think alone, I don't even know that I would have started, or I wouldn't have gone very far. But with Amy, we went in there, and with that support from her and the accountability, we started. And you know what? As I was running, it just felt better. And my joints felt better. as I ran. And that's because exercise and fitness actually can do the opposite here and help tone the parasympathetic part of our nervous system. So exercise is part of my sandbags. Having the accountability and social support is part of my sandbag. And this is what we do with the people that we work with. We help identify and build those safely. Some people don't have exercise tolerance, right? Like if you've had a concussion, you may have symptoms with exercise. So you need to go through a graded exercise progression to build that up. And that's exactly what we do. So identify those sandbags and then we build them. So sometimes it's looking at some of the barriers and how do we get through those. Sometimes it is referring to another practitioner. So I love working with our OT at some of these lifestyle pieces for sleep. I personally am a very firm believer in emotional health. So maybe it's more therapy, more support. A couple of other things that have been really great resources, by the way, that I just want to share. Really love this book called The Body Keeps Score: Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. It is a book about trauma. You got to be prepared for that. But what it talks about is that ongoing stress. And what I really love is that he talks about different kinds of therapy for trauma, for stress, for prolonged stress, and links it to the body and how the body holds on to that stress. So he also talks about the effects of the brain and effects on the immune system. So really great resource for growing your own understanding of building those resources and helping others build those resources as well. Another great resource, I just grabbed all my books today, but I've been diving into these more and more. Jon Kabat-Zinn, a leader in mindfulness-based stress reduction. This is a thick one, but 100% worth it. Full catastrophe living, using the wisdom of your body and mind to face stress, pain, and illness. So I took a mindfulness-based stress reduction course a few years back, and it was based on this book and based on the evidence-based treatment program in using mindfulness. But that can become then something that we can help build a sandbag mindfulness training. So we've talked about a couple of things, how we can build our sandbags, by identifying, building them up. And then finally, the last piece is prepping the journey of flare-ups. So I really love, David Butler has this great video. I'll pull a link in here. I think I can do that right now. So if you're here live, you can even check that out. He tells a story of another therapist that he was working with, Helen, and he uses the metaphor of Toblerone, and he uses it to explain, like, you might have a flare-up, but don't freak out if you do. It's very much, so if you imagine Toblerone, right? So it's got these little pieces in it, and if you're putting it like so, and we have that in our little diagram here as well. So here's our Toblerone. So our trajectory is here. Our trajectory is improvement. We may have some curves. We may come down. It may look like this, but overall the trajectory is going forward and going up. And that's the way you do it with flares. It's not talking doom and gloom like my very first rheumatologist talked to me the first time I was diagnosed, like, this is a downhill battle, it's just going to get worse, you can control it with medication, but heaven forbid you get off medication and have kids, and really terrified me, to be honest. That's how not to do the flare-up talk. But Toblerone, knowing that of course there's going to be up and down and even a flare-up, but it's not too bad, and you know what to do about it. And with the Toblerone, actually, we do have Toblerone in the clinic. With the Toblerone, you can then break off a piece and eat it, and you got chocolate, and everybody's happy. So I love that analogy. We use that along with this little flare up journey to talk through like these are normal, and we're going to provide and find ways where you can be autonomous in knowing what those things are that help you. Like I know and I feel very confident that if I have a flare, I know exactly what I need to do. I need to keep moving. I need to have more therapy. I need to cut sugar. That's something that flares up my joints. So I have the tools to face a flare, and that makes me feel very confident, and that's what we build in the people that we work with. So that was a lot for today. I've been feeling a lot about this topic. If you couldn't notice, if you love these, I would love for you to use them. So they are available. I'll pop a link in here where we actually have short videos and all of our helpful handouts that have been really good for those cases where you see the up and down, the flares on the journey, those complex cases. So that is available for download. I'll share that with you here, and I'll also share a couple of links with great reviews of that stress impact on the neuroimmune system. I think it's so important in our understanding, and knowing too that we have some resources and sandbags to help us get through it. So there you have it. Thanks so much for joining me on this Friday, and we'll see you here next week. Have a great weekend.